I would wear a lot of dark makeup or wear dark clothing, but let's be honest, you guys, I'm too white for that. Like really white. I'm not saying it would look bad on anybody. I think the opposite. I think it would look better on many people. Me, no. I'm too nerdy and white to wear any of that. And trust me, people would be better off not seeing me in that get up. So this is what you get for this review.
Bash the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. You felt how awful goodness.
The Crow, 1994, is directed by Alex Proyas with a screenplay by David J. Schow and John Shirley. The film stars Brandon Lee, Ernie Hudson, and Michael Wincott. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, the night before his wedding, musician Eric Draven and his fiancée are brutally murdered by members of a violent gang. On the anniversary of their death, Eric rises from the grave and assumes the mantle of the Crow, a supernatural avenger. The Crow is considered by many as one of the best comic book films of an era that saw terrible comic book movies. Right, this was the 90s. At that time, comic books just weren't hitting it as much as people thought they would. Aside from Blade, a year later, Blade would come out, and that was pretty good. But aside from that, you saw an era where you just didn't get a lot of good comic book movies, to be honest, and a lot of people can agree with that. Though the film is remembered for its styling and atmosphere, and rightfully so, I will not deny that. How this film looks and how it is presented in this movie, I will not deny it's out there. It is very much of its own, and of course, a lot of people could say it mirrors what the comics are, but it stands on its own for what it is. A stylistic, atmospheric, gritty comic book movie that came out in an era where you didn't see a lot of this kind of stuff, but is remembered mostly for Brandon Lee. For those who don't know, Brandon Lee was the son of famous martial artist Bruce Lee. Unfortunately, Brandon Lee tragically died on the set from a prop gun, as we see today in a lot of big production films, and it's still raging on today of gun control safety. It's because of this death that kind of pushed it over the edge of actually trying to make sure that there is safety regulations on film sets with regards to prop masters and making sure that people are safe. And in fact, as of recently, there's a lot of production sets like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, his production, $7, they use fake guns on sets. And this was very much a long decade of complaints about gun safety. I mean, as recently we saw with the Rust set with Alec Baldwin and how that is still going on to this day about the issues of gun safety on movie sets. And this was one of the tipping points of that conversation to be discussed. Since his tragic death, the film is remembered for Lee's legacy and his impact. He was, of course, a young up-and-coming actor, and unfortunately his life was just taken too short, and this is his last movie that he will ever make. Having watched the film for the first time, this was my first time watching it. I had never seen it. I have always heard about The Crow. I know what it is, and I know what people have said about this movie, but this was my first time watching it. I'm being as honest as I can be. I can see why the film is remembered fondly by a lot of people, of course, based on a comic book, but it's fondly remembered by fans of being a really good adaptation, but also just being a really good film. So here are the positives that I saw with it. The performances are stellar. Brandon Lee is tragic and confident as Eric Draven. Lee knows how to be haunting and daring as a man who seeks vengeance against those who murdered his wife and him. Of course, Brandon Lee, very young, sad, it's very tragic, but I will say I do think that he gives a really good performance for what would ultimately be his final performance. And for what they had to work around, even with some of the shots that they had to do with visual effects, I think they did a good enough job to where they did respect Lee and his legacy living on playing this character and why he will always be synonymous with. And it's just so sad because I think that he could have had a very successful and very prosperous life as an actor, but it was just cut short sadly. But I think he is really good in this movie and he's very captivating. Ernie Hudson is likable as Sergeant Albrecht. Hudson plays an honest and respectful cop that tries to help Eric out. Throughout the movie, Albrecht, when he meets up with Eric Draven and he talks about how from what he saw the night of the murder of Eric and his fiance dying, Hudson just knows how to play a relatable guy. Ever since I think Ghostbusters, he's just always known how to play down to earth, relatable guys who just are in the worst possible positions, but just know how to make it as humane as possible by keeping that humanity to the character and making him so relatable for viewers to attach themselves to. Rochelle Davis is lovable and caring as Sarah, a neighbor to Eric and Shirley. Rochelle plays Sarah as relatable and not annoying as most child characters that we usually see in films. I think she does play a child that isn't stupid, isn't dumb. She does run in her mouth, but she is not a complete idiot. She's not somebody who does dumb things or just pulls stuff out in the film to help the hero in any way. No, she is a very loving and caring character that is sympathetic and can be kind, but just has a rough upbringing from where she lives. Both Lee, Hudson, and Davis are excellent together. Whether Lee and Hudson, Hudson Davis, and Lee and Davis, they have all great chemistry throughout this movie. Their interactions with one another keeps the film engaged and keeps it grounded and keeps it believable on this man trying to avenge his fiance. But having these conversations with Davis, his neighbor, and showing her sympathy and kindness, and then of course having conversations with Albrecht and how Hudson tries to be grounded with him and how he saw things, it keeps the film engaging with how the characters are. Michael Wincott is enjoyable as Top Dollar, who is the villain of this film. Though I do have an issue with the character, Wincott does make him decent to watch. He does make him fun and likable to watch because of his performance. And furthermore, I can at least be like, alright, at the very least, he does give a decent enough performance to not make me dismiss it. The direction is solid. Director Alec Proyas leans into the comic book style and tone without feeling campy. It all feels natural with this film, with this being based off of a comic book property, but also trying to take the elements of what this is taking influence of, which is the goth culture. We never saw a lot of this in films, and really, The Crow, after this, you saw a zeitgeist in a lot of films that tried to be as dark and gothic as it can be, and help pave the way for other movies to do that, because you just didn't see a lot of movies doing this at the time, and Alex Proyas did that, and he did it in a way that didn't feel forced. It felt natural to what this movie is trying to do, and how he manages to balance the tone and stylings, I think, works well. The cinematography is amazing. Cinematographer Darius Wolski captures comic book's atmosphere, truly making a comic book film with every frame. No matter what shot it is, I feel like Wolski does a good job of capturing almost like graphic panels, and it's almost like you can capture a frame of this movie and it can almost feel like a comic book panel come to life on a big screen, and it's done well with all the frames and shots throughout, and it makes you really follow along with what the movie's going for. The music is stellar. Composer Graham Revel crafts a score that fits the vibes of what the film is supposed to be. Also, the licensed music is perfect for what this movie is and what it's known for, besides that score, which is very haunting and very atmospheric, but also how the licensed music is implemented works really well, especially Korn's music and When Eric is Reborn. And to this day, a lot of people remember that song that is played in the film, and I think it fits well with what the tone of this movie is. The production is incredible. Trying to stay down and grungy, all the sets and costumes feel lived in, making the world of The Crow feel atmospheric in a way that is believable. Yes, we're dealing with a guy who comes back from the dead through the spirit of a crow and cannot 100% die until he gets the vengeance that he is seeking. At the same time, and as much as the city of Detroit is always on fire, it's still grounded in a way where it's believable. You believe everything that happens in this version of Detroit fits well and feels grounded to that point. The story is investing. Watching Eric Draven get revenge on the gang that killed his fiance and himself made for an entertaining one. It's just a good old-fashioned revenge film that people enjoy. A lot of people enjoy revenge films. I mean, John Wick does that still, and this is no exception. I found myself very much invested with this, but it was both differently than what I usually see with a lot of revenge films, which is usually the sole survivor sees what the villain has done to their life and they go get revenge. This is like after they had murdered him and the person he cares about. And both of them are dead, but he's brought back to be given one last chance to avenge, or at the very least get revenge. And it works really well with how the film goes about telling that story. The pacing and runtime is engaging. Each scene is always consistent and never drags on. With a runtime of 1 hour and 42 minutes, everything is said from the get-go. There's not a point where I feel like this movie drags on or it feels like it's stalling out. It tells the story how it needs to tell it in a timely manner that doesn't feel like it is bloated, because I don't think it needs to go bloated. The action is exciting, though not many. Any action scene feels thrilling and stylistic at a time where you didn't see a lot of this type of action going on, or if you did, it was probably like Hong Kong movies, like Chinese cinema. Adding the dark and grittiness to it as well helps the film keep it from being not as generic or as stale as you mostly see in a lot of action or revenge thrillers. At the very least, the action still makes it feel a little bit stylistic to where it's not to the point of it's terribly forgettable. It's at least memorable enough. Though fun, there's a few issues I have with this movie. Just a few. So here are the negatives with the film. The visuals have dated. Some of the shots that shows the city of Detroit or showing Eric's power hasn't aged all that well. While impressive for the time, not everything just looks great. Especially when the movie opens and you see the city of Detroit on fire, you could definitely tell it's a green screen pan and shot of a visualized Detroit. Very much so. There's even certain shots of camera moving, and you could tell that there's some miniatures with green screen around it. And Eric's powers, when he gets shot, the bullet hole in him, yeah, it hasn't aged all that gracefully. The villain is bland. While performed well by Michael Wincott, I can't deny that, the character just isn't scary to me. He's not threatening. Although I will say he does put up a fight near the end of the movie, which is at least decent enough. The character's just all talk and could have done more with this film. To me, he just doesn't leave an impact to where I'm very much thinking, wow, he was a very intimidating character. He, of course he fought at the end, but at the same time, he just talk. That's all he is. He's just talk. And some of his side goons too are kind of just talk, but at the very least, it keeps the film engaged with its premise of revenge. So I'll give it that, but even then, that's the only thing that just kind of holds me back from it. Great comic book movie for the time. Brandon Lee's legacy continues to live through this film. Though dated visuals and a bland villain do hold it back, the film still holds up. It's impressive with how much this is a 30-year-old film. People, this is 30 years old now this year. And for being 30 years old, it holds up damn well, and it's a pretty entertaining one at best. I'm going to give The Crow 1994 an 8 out of 10. I think it is a great film. I think it is a good adaptation of what some people say about the comic books. But also, it's just an overall great film that explores goth culture in a way that you didn't see a lot of at the time. And for this to be Brandon Lee's last film, I mean, I think he went out in a way, I'm not saying this in a positive light, but in a good way, he ended on something that was very strong and very satisfying that left a good impact on his career. Now I will review the remake of The Crow, and then August is done. Like I said, I didn't see a lot. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.